The year is 1963. Imagine, if you will, a dimly lit, incense-choked living room in a sprawling bohemian pad in California. It's a scene straight out of a counterculture fever dream. The air is thick with patchouli and marijuana smoke. A dozen barefoot, starry-eyed college dropouts are sprawled across Persian rugs, talking about peace, love, and the imminent death of the American establishment. Suddenly, the front door flies open. The draft extinguishes half the candles in the room. Standing in the doorway is a man who looks like he just walked out of a Pentagon briefing. He's pushing 60. He's wearing a crisp, dark suit, a perfectly knotted tie, and carrying a heavy, combination-locked leather briefcase. A prominent bulge under his left arm heavily suggests a holstered .45 caliber pistol. The room goes dead silent. The hippies freeze. Someone whispers, "Oh shit, it's the feds. It's a raid." The man in the suit steps into the room. He looks at the barefoot youths with absolute, unvarnished disgust. He hates the way they smell. He hates their politics. He despises everything they stand for. He walks over to the coffee table, clearing away a pile of rolling papers with a sweep of his massive hand. He sets down the heavy leather briefcase. Click, click, the latches snap open. The hippies brace themselves for handcuffs. Instead, the man flips the lid back. Inside, perfectly arranged in custom-cut foam, are rows upon rows of medical-grade glass vials. It's not evidence. It's not a weapon. It's a massive, staggering quantity of 100% pure Swiss-manufactured Sandoz LSD. The man glares at the room, his eyes hard. "All right, you goddamn amateurs," he barks. "Sit down, shut up, and prepare to meet God." Welcome to Audacious History, the channel where we dig up the most batshit, unbelievable, and completely true stories from the forgotten corners of the human past. Today, we are talking about the 1960s. When you think of the psychedelic revolution, who comes to mind? Timothy Leary? The Grateful Dead? A bunch of long-haired kids in Volkswagen buses talking about the cosmos? Well, what if I told you that the entire psychedelic movement, the very catalyst that broke the brains of a generation and ushered in the era of acid, was almost entirely jump-started by a conservative, right-wing, devoutly Catholic, gun-toting former CIA spy? His name was Captain Alfred Hubbard. He was a rum runner, a uranium entrepreneur, a covert operative, and a walking, talking contradiction. He is estimated to have personally guided over 6,000 people through their first LSD trips. We're talking Silicon Valley pioneers, powerful politicians, high-ranking priests, and CEOs. He flew around North America in his private plane, carrying a briefcase full of the purest acid on Earth, acting like the Johnny Appleseed of mind-expanding chemicals. And the kicker? He absolutely hated hippies. Strap in, folks. This is the story of the most bizarre undercover missionary of the 20th century. To understand how Alfred Hubbard became the godfather of the acid age, you have to first understand that this guy was a hustler of monumental proportions from day one. Born in Kentucky in 1901, Hubbard's early life is a messy blend of fact, fiction, and absolute myth-making, mostly propagated by the man himself. By the time he was a teenager, Hubbard had relocated to Seattle. Now, this wasn't a kid who was going to settle down and work at a lumber yard. Al Hubbard had a brain that operated on a different frequency. In 1919, at the ripe age of 18, he invented something he called the Hubbard Energy Transformer. Hubbard claimed this device could pull radiant energy directly from the air to power electrical equipment without batteries. He even publicly demonstrated it, allegedly powering a boat across Seattle's Portage Bay using nothing but his magic box. Was it a genuine breakthrough in free energy? Or was it a brilliantly disguised battery hidden inside a wooden crate? Most historians lean heavily toward the latter, calling it top-tier bullshit. But it didn't matter. The kid had a flair for the dramatic, and he caught the attention of some very important, very dangerous people. Enter the Prohibition era. Alcohol was illegal, and the Pacific Northwest was a prime smuggling route. The local rum runners saw Hubbard's energy transformer and realized they didn't care about free energy, but they did care about the sophisticated radio technology he was messing around with. Hubbard began working with the criminal underworld, outfitting their smuggling boats with advanced ship-to-shore communication systems. He essentially built a private radio network for bootleggers that allowed them to coordinate drops, dodge the Coast Guard, and make an absolute fortune. Hubbard wasn't just a tech guy, he was an active participant. He bought his own boat, strapped a massive engine onto it, and became one of the most notorious rum runners on the West Coast. He loved the thrill. He loved the danger. And most of all, he loved outsmarting the authorities. But eventually, his luck ran out. The feds caught up with him, and Hubbard was sent to federal prison for a brief stint. You'd think an 18-month sentence would humble a guy. For Al, it was just a networking opportunity. While in lockup, he made connections that would eventually lead to a full presidential pardon. Because if there's one thing Al Hubbard was good at, it was talking his way out of trouble and right into the halls of power. When World War II broke out, the United States government realized that while Al Hubbard was a convicted felon, he was also a genius with a radio, a seasoned smuggler, and a guy who clearly didn't give a damn about the rules. Naturally, they hired him. Hubbard was brought into the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which was the badass, completely unregulated precursor to the CIA. During the war, Hubbard operated in the shadows. His official records are either non-existent, highly classified, or conveniently lost to time. What we do know is that he was allegedly smuggling heavy weaponry into Canada before the U.S. officially entered the war, acting as a covert liaison between American intelligence and British operatives. He was given the honorary title of Captain, a moniker he would proudly wear for the rest of his life. He wore the title like a tailored suit, projecting authority wherever he went. After the war, the OSS dissolved and the CIA was born. Hubbard kept his security clearances and his shadowy government ties, but he decided it was time to get filthy rich. Recognizing that the atomic age was upon them, Captain Hubbard shifted his focus to mining. He set his sights on Canadian uranium. Through a series of aggressive business moves, backroom deals, and sheer unadulterated confidence, Hubbard became a director of a uranium mining company. Almost overnight, he went from a government spook to a multimillionaire. He had a sprawling estate, a fleet of luxury cars, and a private airplane. But here is where the audacity of Al Hubbard begins to take a hard left turn. Despite his wealth, his guns, and his ruthless business acumen, Hubbard was also an incredibly devout, conservative Catholic. We're talking rosary beads in the pocket, goes to Mass every Sunday Catholic. By the early 1950s, he was rich, powerful, and utterly miserable. He looked around at his life and felt a profound, aching emptiness. He had conquered the material world, outsmarted the feds, and built an empire, but his soul felt like an empty cavern. He was desperately searching for meaning, praying to God for a sign. And God, or whatever cosmic force you want to believe in, answered him. But the answer didn't come in a Bible. It came in a microscopic droplet of a synthetic chemical synthesized by a Swiss chemist named Albert Hofmann. In 1951, Hubbard was reading a scientific journal when he stumbled across an obscure article about a strange new compound being tested in Switzerland. It was called lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD-25. At this point, LSD was strictly an experimental psychiatric drug. Doctors thought it was a psychotomimetic, a drug that simulated temporary schizophrenia. They were using it to try and understand the minds of the insane. But Hubbard read between the lines. He saw reports of patients experiencing profound, overwhelming visions. He didn't see madness. He saw a potential gateway to the divine. Using his immense wealth and formidable connections, Hubbard secured a batch of LSD. He didn't want to take it in a sterile hospital room with a bunch of guys in lab coats scribbling on clipboards. He wanted to do it his way. Hubbard went into his private study, locked the door, and ingested a hefty dose of acid. What happened next completely rewired the circuitry of the captain's brain. According to his own accounts, as the LSD washed over his central nervous system, the walls of his study dissolved. He felt himself thrust into the absolute center of the universe. He didn't just see geometric patterns. He experienced a full-blown Holy Communion. An angelic entity appeared before him. It spoke to him not in words, but in pure, unadulterated concepts. The entity told Hubbard that humanity was on the brink of self-destruction. Remember, this is the height of the Cold War and the nuclear arms race, and that the chemical, this LSD, was a sacrament sent by God to elevate human consciousness and save the world from total annihilation. When Hubbard came down from the trip, the ruthless uranium capitalist was gone. In his place was a man possessed by a holy chemical mission. He believed that if he could just get the most powerful, influential people in the world to take LSD, he could single-handedly steer humanity toward a golden age of peace and enlightenment. But he wasn't going to do it by handing out tabs at a rock concert. Oh, hell no! Hubbard was a professional. He was going to do it with military precision. Hey, do me a favor and support independent history storytelling by hitting that subscribe button. Done it? Awesome. Now let's get back to the captain and his magical briefcase. Armed with his new messianic complex, Hubbard flew straight to the source. He went to the Sandoz pharmaceutical laboratories in Switzerland and used his government credentials and immense bankroll to buy thousands of doses of pharmaceutical-grade LSD. He returned to North America and set up his headquarters in Vancouver, British Columbia. There, he built what would become legendary in psychiatric circles, the Hubbard Room. Up until this point, doctors were giving people acid in cold, bright, terrifying hospital wards, which inevitably resulted in bad trips. Hubbard revolutionized the process. He invented the concept of set and setting. His room was designed to be the ultimate safe space. It had plush couches, soft lighting, and state-of-the-art stereo equipment. He would play classical music, Brahms, Beethoven, Bach. He would display beautiful works of art. He would have his subjects look at a sparkling, diamond-encrusted cross to focus their spiritual energy. And who was he inviting to this room? Not kids, not rebels. Hubbard targeted the elite. He believed that if you wanted to change the world, you didn't start at the bottom, you started at the top. He packed his leather briefcase with vials of Sandoz LSD and flew his private plane up and down the West Coast. He was relentless. He administered LSD to top-tier engineers in Silicon Valley, fundamentally influencing the early days of the tech revolution. He dosed leading psychiatrists, showing them the therapeutic potential of the drug. He even dosed prominent Catholic priests, trying to prove that LSD was the ultimate tool to understand the Holy Ghost. One of his most famous, unheralded achievements was his work with severe alcoholics. Hubbard realized that a massive, spiritually profound LSD trip could completely wipe out a person's desire to drink. He achieved a staggering 50 to 80% success rate in curing alcoholism, a number so high it makes modern rehab centers look like an absolute joke. He even introduced the drug to Bill W., the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, who was so blown away by the spiritual power of LSD that he wanted to introduce it into the AA program. The AA board politely but firmly told Bill W. that he was out of his goddamn mind. Hubbard was on top of the world. He was the secret architect of human evolution, a spy playing God with a briefcase full of miracles. But then the 1960s happened. By the mid-1960s, LSD had leaked out of the sterile laboratories and the plush, controlled environments of elite therapists. It hit the streets. Suddenly, the drug that Hubbard viewed as a sacred surgical tool for the elite was being mass-produced in dirty underground bathtubs and handed out like candy to teenagers at Grateful Dead concerts. And Hubbard was absolutely livid. The face of this new movement was Dr. Timothy Leary, a former Harvard professor who became the high priest of the hippie movement. Leary's mantra was, turn on, tune in, drop out. He believed LSD was a democratizing force, that everyone, everywhere should take it all the time to shatter the establishment. Hubbard, remember, was the establishment. He was a conservative, pro-military, suit-wearing Catholic who believed you only gave acid to people who could handle the responsibility of power. To Hubbard, Leary wasn't a visionary. He was a reckless, arrogant moron who was going to ruin the greatest discovery in human history. This ideological clash culminated in a tense, absolutely bizarre confrontation that perfectly encapsulates the paradox of Al Hubbard. The setting is a high-level psychedelic conference, an unofficial meeting of the minds. The room is filled with academics, therapists, and the new breed of counterculture icons. Timothy Leary is holding court, speaking in his soft, hypnotic voice about how LSD will dissolve the military-industrial complex and free the youth from the tyranny of their parents. The crowd is nodding along, mesmerized. Suddenly, a heavy rhythmic thud echoes from the back of the room. It's Captain Hubbard, his leather shoes slamming against the hardwood floor. He marches down the center aisle. He is the only man in the room wearing a suit. He looks like an FBI agent crashing a seance. Hubbard stops right in front of Leary. The room goes dead quiet. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a machete. Leary looks up, offering a serene, peace and love smile. "Welcome, Al," Leary says softly. "Join the circle." Hubbard doesn't sit. He glares down at Leary with a look of pure, concentrated venom. "I won't sit in your damn circle, Tim," Hubbard growls, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You are making a massive, catastrophic mistake." Leary's smile doesn't waver. "The medicine is for everyone, Al. We have to free the minds of the youth." Hubbard leans in, his massive frame casting a dark shadow over the guru. "You're a fool," Hubbard snaps. "You don't hand a loaded machine gun to a toddler and tell them to figure it out. This isn't a toy. It's a sacrament. It requires discipline. It requires guidance." A young barefoot hippie sitting near Leary scoffs. "Man, you're just trying to hoard the magic for the men in suits. You're just a square." Hubbard's eyes snap to the kid. Faster than anyone expects for a man his age, his hand slips inside his tailored jacket. He doesn't pull his .45, but he rests his hand right on the grip, adjusting his coat just enough for the heavy black steel of the gun to flash in the dim light. The kid swallows hard and practically shrinks into the floorboards. Hubbard turns his attention back to Leary. "You're running a circus, Tim," he says, his voice dripping with absolute contempt. You're telling these kids to drop out. You're telling them to abandon society. Who the hell is going to run the world when you're all staring at your hands for 10 hours a day? You're going to force the government's hand. They will crush this. They will ban it. And you will have ruined the only chance we had to save this godforsaken species. Leary just shakes his head. You're too attached to the old paradigm, Captain. The revolution is already here. Hubbard stands up straight, his face a mask of bitter prophecy. It's not a revolution, Hubbard spits. It's a suicide pact. He turns on his heel, his leather briefcase clutched tightly in his hand, and marches out of the room, leaving the long-haired dreamers to their fate. And, as history shows us, Hubbard was absolutely 100% right. By 1966, the political backlash against the hippie movement reached a boiling point. The government, terrified of this unpredictable youth culture, brought the hammer down. LSD was made strictly illegal. Sandoz stopped producing it. The clinical trials were forcibly shut down. The golden age of psychedelic research was murdered in its crib. For Captain Alfred Hubbard, it was a devastating, world-shattering blow. His life's mission was suddenly a federal crime. The government he had served, the establishment he had so fiercely defended, had turned around and outlawed his sacred sacrament. Hubbard was forced to shut down his operations. The man who had flown across continents with a briefcase full of pure liquid God was suddenly grounded. Worse still, his vast fortune began to evaporate. He had spent millions of his own money buying LSD, funding clinics, and flying around the world on his holy crusade. With his operations shut down and his uranium money drying up, the multimillionaire spy found himself broke. In his later years, Hubbard was reduced to working odd jobs to pay the rent. The man who arguably sparked the most profound cultural shift of the 20th century ended up working as a security consultant for a private firm, living in a mobile home park in Arizona. He remained a bitter, walking contradiction until his dying day. He hated the counterculture for what they did to LSD, and he hated the government for taking it away. He died in 1982 at the age of 81, relatively obscure and completely uncompromising in his beliefs. Captain Alfred Hubbard is the ultimate glitch in the historical matrix. We like our history neat and tidy. We want the people who popularized psychedelics to be peace-loving, anti-war hippies with flowers in their hair. Instead, the true architect of the acid age was a right-wing, gun-toting spy-turned-millionaire who thought he was carrying out a divine mission for the Catholic God. He was arrogant, he was aggressive, and he was arguably one of the most effective, subversive medical pioneers of his era. He proved that history isn't made by the people who fit the mold, it's made by the audacious bastards who shatter it completely. Thank you for watching Audacious History. If you want more stories of the chaotic weirdos who secretly built the world we live in, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. Would you have taken a trip in Captain Hubbard's leather-bound briefcase? Until next time, stay curious, stay audacious, and keep questioning the narrative.